Welcome to the Green, my friends. I am Shannon, and I am here to weave spooky folklore tales while weaving on my loom. If you are visiting my YouTube channel, Cottage Weaver of Fiber and Tales, you will get to see my fiber work in progress. But if you are someone who prefers to listen to stories, then my podcast, Campfire Ghost Stories, is the place for you. Whichever you prefer, you are welcome to sit and relax and be yourself. I try to get out to the green as much as possible, as it is always a safe place for me, and I hope you can get a chance to experience that peace as well. Before we get started, I just wanted to say that I will be offering a subscription option on Patreon as well as Spotify. I took some time to think of something that I wanted to offer. Personally, I always look for ways to de-stress and get out of my own head. I don't know about you, but sometimes I find the best answer to a situation is when I'm not focusing so hard on it. It is one of the reasons why I enjoy weaving so much. It gives me a chance to get out of my head and just let my mind relax. It's usually during this time when I find solutions to problems or find new topics to discuss for my podcast. One thing about me is that I am an animal lover. I have a few animals right now, and they bring me a lot of joy and a lot of peace. So I thought, why not extend that to my listeners? If you watched my YouTube channel, Cottage Weaver of Fiber and Tales, you will probably have seen one or two of my fur babes already. But I thought, why not provide a peek inside their lives for those who also need a chance to de-stress and relax? So I will be providing some short videos of my creatures. They will each have an intro, a little bit about how they came to live with me, and a video of their antics. I am hoping these videos might give some of you a chance to let your mind rest as well, and a chance to shed some of that societal stress that we all face. Maybe you're not able to have pets at this time, but would love a furry friend and love to see some happy and goofy animals. Once I have the video set up, I will announce the start date for you. Now, there is no commitment, and there won't be any words or any stress or anything you have to do. Just sit back and watch, and I hope it brings you a bit of peace. Thank you for all of your support. And now, on to the tale of mermaids. If you listened to episode 16, you will have heard of the early version and, dare I say, the first version of the siren. But for this episode, we will look into more recent descriptions of the sirens, and that is the mermaid. If you don't know, there have been some debate as to mermaids being sirens, and in episode 16, I had discussed the first mention of a siren in Homer's Odyssey. So when was the first mention of a mermaid? And by that I mean the half-woman, half-fish type. Well, the first documented mentions of a human/animal was discovered during the time of the Sumerians and Babylonians. These are the first recorded groups of organized people, and they lived in an area that we now call Turkey. This would be circa 1894 to 1595 BC. Now, during this time, there was a god named Enki. Actually, there were a number of gods back then, but it is Enki who is described as being part man, part fish. Now, the descriptions and the carvings of Enki showed that from the head to the torso, he was a man. But the bottom half, that had a tail like a fish. Now, Enki was a god of many talents, including a god of fresh water, and later considered to have power over mischief, magic, creation, fertility, and intelligence. We learned from the ancient manuscripts found at the Babylonians' last site that it was Enki who taught these people the alphabet. He taught them science, how to build cities. He instructed them on how to create laws, and also taught them about agriculture. However, when the Greeks and Romans adopted this god, they adopted him in the form of Poseidon and gave him different attributes. However, When the god Poseidon and the goddess Aphrodite conceived a child, they named Triton. It is Triton who, for all accounts, was a merman, and his description was more akin to the god of Enki. If you dive a bit deeper into Greek history, you will discover creatures called nymphs. These were creatures with the upper body of a female and a lower body of a fish. But there are descriptions that state even the upper body was a female, it still had scales on it. Now, there were different types of nymphs. The naiads were considered to be a sailor's friend. They would watch out for sailors while they were out sailing. But when did the mermaid become the demonic, flesh-eating creature? Well, you can thank Christianity for that, as when Christianity began its influence, it did so by demonizing all forms of gods and goddesses, including creatures such as nymphs. It was an attempt to remove all forms of paganism from people, so anything that was not Judeo-Christian was nothing more than bad or evil or just plain wrong. Now, this was done by means of threats, coercion, false accusations, and, yes, sometimes physical harm. It is interesting to note that not only do we have descriptions of fish hybrids going back to roughly 1894, but also we have descriptions of what we call mermaids in other cultures. The Talmud, for example, is an ancient Jewish book of laws and legends. In it, an 11th century rabbi, Shlomo Yitzchaki, described an actual mermaid, and he writes, "There are fish in the sea, with which half is in the form of man, and half in the form of a fish, called sirene in Old French." Now, the French word for sirene is, of course, siren. In the 13th century, a book called Speculum Regale describes a mermaid who washed ashore on the coast of Greenland. In this book, the mermaid is described much like other mermaids. The upper body is that of a woman, and the lower part is that of a fish. But this description adds a little bit more, including the fact that this mermaid had wavy, heavy hair. She had webbing in between her fingers, and her face is actually described as horrible, with a broad brow and piercing eyes. It goes on to describe the mermaid having a wide mouth and a double chin. This particular mermaid appears before violent storms. And here's where you have to pay attention. If a ship is at sea and this mermaid is seen, there are usually one of two outcomes. If the mermaid is seen with a fish in its hand and turns towards the ship, playing with the fish, then the men should be in fear because they will suffer a great loss. But if the mermaid eats the fish or throws the fish into the sea away from the ship, then that is a good sign that the crew will survive even during the most severe of storm. In 1608, a Henry Hudson was sailing on an expedition to discover a northwest passage. One day, a number of his crewmen reported the sight of a mermaid. The upper body was that of a woman with long black hair and white skin. From the navel down, it looked like a porpoise and speckled like a mackerel. But the stories don't stop there. Our brothers and sisters to the east have their own harrowing stories about mermaids. On the island of Japan is a creature known as the amabiko. It is one of the yokai. Now, yokai are supernatural entities and spirits. The amabiko is one such yokai who inhabits the oceans. The amabiko sightings are few, but they always appear from the ocean to deliver a prophecy of abundant harvest, followed by a period of disaster and disease. Now, in order to protect oneself from the disease, the person should copy the image of the amabiko and use it as protection against the following disease. Then, the amabiko disappears back into the ocean. During the later half of the 19th century, when the epidemic of COVID was in full swing, I'm sure we all remember that, it was believed that keeping a picture of the amabiko would keep you protected from the raging disease. The first documented recording of the amabiko, sometimes referred to the amabi, was in 1846, when a government official was investigating a strange green light. A number of people, had reported a green light near a body of water. When this government official got to the origin, found the green light, he also found a glowing green creature with fishy scales, long hair, 3 fin-type feet, and a large beak. This creature warned the man that for the following 6 years there would be an abundant harvest. But Japan would then be hit by a pandemic that would decimate the country. This amabiko advised that in order to protect yourself, draw its image and share it with many people. And that is actually what the newspapers of Japan did during the COVID pandemic. The newspaper shared copies of the amabiko so that people could protect themselves. There are so many sightings of mermaids. Honestly, the list is endless. From Christopher Columbus documenting his sightings of mermaids to even the infamous pirate Blackbeard, who knew where the mermaids lived and purposefully instructed his crew to avoid those areas he termed as enchanted. Here's something else. In 1998, diver Jeff Liker, I'm not 100% sure, it's Leicher, Liker, took a group of people out on a diving expedition. He and his crew were just 20 minutes off of the coast of Kauai when he saw a woman, or what he thought was a woman, swimming with a pod of dolphins. Oddly, he saw that the woman was keeping up with the dolphins. But then the woman jumped into the air. Every person, all 10, on that boat, saw what looked like a woman jumping out of the water, but to their astonishment, the lower half of her was that of a fish. They all see this mermaid jump 2 times out of the water. While everyone was in awe, it was Leaker who dove into the water to try and catch some photos. An hour later, something brushed against him in the water, and when he turned, it is that same mermaid. Quickly, he snapped some pictures as the mermaid swam away. Now, Leaker sent the photos to be tested, and it was confirmed. Those photos are real, with no tampering done to them. Now, let's take a dive down to Australia. This is another recent discovery. Very recent. Last year, 2023, a Bobby Lee Oates was driving along a beach in Queensland when she noticed something that looked odd. It looked like a body. Upon closer inspection, what she found was utterly shocking. When she got closer, Bobby Lee noticed it was a skeleton. It was roughly 6 feet long. The skull was dome-shaped with an elongated jawline. She said that there was still hair attached to the skull and that it was brown, kind of like the color of a cow or a kangaroo. And the body ended in what looked to be some sort of tail. Now, Bobby Lee, believing she might have discovered a new species of sea creature, took photos and posted them to a Facebook page devoted specifically to marine biology. Well, some said it was just a kangaroo with a missing leg. Others did suggest a mermaid or siren, but they did it in a joking way. Others thought it was some sort of sea creature like a marine mammal common to the area, like a dolphin. But no one has able to definitively say just what that skeleton is. And I will be uploading pictures of this particular creature to my Instagram page, so check it out. Tell me what you think. Mermaid, dolphin, alien? It's very intriguing. Now, the fact that sightings are still occurring gives one, with an open mind, that there is something out there in the deep blue. Which, of course, there is so much in the ocean and other large bodies of waters that we just don't know about. The continent of Africa has their own mermaid creatures, called the Mamiwata, a water spirit who is worshipped in nearly all parts, including West, Central, and Southern Africa. The Mamiwata is believed to have originated from West Africa, and the history states that the Mamiwata came from the sky. They are half women, half fish, and sometimes described as having a serpent-like tail. Now, these benevolent creatures were believed to travel with those who were sold into slavery as they made their journey from Africa to other parts of the world where they would be sold. The Mamiwata would comfort and protect these people. Now the Mamiwata are looked at for support and for guidance. They are seen as a symbol of strength and resilience and having great power with the ability to attract followers from many different cultures around the continent. Africa is even more special as there is another mermaid species called the Yemoja. This is another mermaid deity found among the Yoruba tribe of Nigeria inside West Africa. The Yemoja are also half woman and half fish. But where the Mamiyata were looked at for guidance, the Yemoja are associated with the sea and fertility. In fact, it is the Yemoja who were said to return souls lost at sea to their necessary destination. They also were said to have caused some slave ships to wreck. In this way, the Yemoja are also a protector, and I think that is magically beautiful. But let's not stop there, because Haiti, which is located in the Caribbean, has a variety of water spirits that are just as magical and mysterious. The Le Sarine, to those who worship her, is a bringer of fortune, beauty, and transformation. She is a symbol of captivation and allure, but also unpredictability, somewhat like the ocean itself. Le Sarine is a mermaid that represents the temperament of the ocean, giving and beautiful, but also deadly, with fast punishment. Now, I shared with you the history of Japanese mermaids a bit earlier. Remember the Amabiko, sometimes called the Amabi? But Japan is not the only continent to the east with a legend or two. Remember when I said the earliest documentation of a man/fish hybrid was in the Sumerian and Babylonian era? Well, China has their own legend going back to what is estimated to be the 4th century BC. An ancient text called the Shanhai Jing has a reference to a mermaid. The Chinese had called the mermaid a Lingyu or Renyu. The text states that the creature has a human face and a fish's body and lives in the sea. But the Renyu were not the only creatures who lived in those waters. There were other mermaids too. The Chiru, Dairen, and the Hirin are some of these creatures. Now, it's reported that they would sound like babies crying in the oceans, while others actually had 4 feet, which is a little similar to Japan's Amabiko, which, if you remember, had 3 feet. China's history has a number of references to mermaids. Another book, dating back to the 4th century, called the Shizi, had reported documentations of mermaids. Even during the Ming Dynasty, that's 1368 to 1644. Another book, called the Xiao Xin Ji, described encounters and descriptions of mermaids. And even during the Yuan Dynasty, 1271 to 1368, we have yet another documentation of mermaids. These mermaids were documented with having fair complexions. However, this version does not have the lower fish-type body. The documentation China has throughout the centuries were mermaid-type creatures were very vast and very amazing. And it really begs the question how two groups of people from different parts of the world, take the Sumerians and the Chinese, can see and document these creatures with a number of similarities. And let me just interject here. If my pronunciations are wrong, I really do apologize because, well, English is my first language. And sometimes I'm not great at that. But honestly, I could go on about these mermaids. There is so much lore across the globe, and it's truly fascinating to me. I actually plan to dive deeper into the realms of underwater creatures because, honestly, I barely skimmed the surface. I know so many have now said that mermaids are nothing more than manatees, but that can't explain it all away. The manatee only inhabits a small portion of the world, and no one can undoubtedly state that every sighting from every continent and every land and province saw nothing more than a manatee. Come on. As I finish this weaving, I realize I should have done something in a variety of blues and greens to correspond with this mermaid tale. But alas, I work with what I have, and even though pink might not be my favorite color in the color spectrum, I think these colors make for a beautiful wrap, and in perfect time for the approaching cool weather. I have shared some photos of the mermaids mentioned above, and I'm curious as to your thoughts on the subject. You can go ahead and take a look at my Instagram page, Cottage Weaver of Fiber and Tales, and let me know what you think. Are all these sightings just manatees, or is it something else? And if you have a sighting of a mermaid yourself that you would like to share, please feel free to do so. I hope you enjoyed these tales and hope to see you again at my next weaving tale. But until then, remember the green is always a safe place, and that's where I'll see you, out in the green.